Welcome to Unbounden, the place where hidden stories rise from the shadows, where the voices of the world try to silence find their echo, and where the quiet perseverance of everyday people collides with destiny in ways no one sees coming. Harold Thompson, that was his name, though for years no one cared to ask, no one cared to know, no one cared to see beyond the mop he pushed down the hallways of Sinclair Corporate Tower in downtown Atlanta. To them, he was invisible, a background figure who moved silently, head down, dressed in faded overalls, the man who polished their tables, emptied their bins, scrubbed the marble floors their shoes clicked across every morning. But what they didn't know was that the man they overlooked had designed the very walls they leaned on, had sketched the bones of buildings more solid than their egos, had dreamed bigger than the boardrooms they guarded so jealously. For 17 years, Harold worked the night shift, entering as the sun disappeared, and leaving as the first light of morning bled into the skyline. A ghost of the corporate world who left no trace except spotless floors and polished glass. Security nodded. Executives ignored him. Employees brushed past him as though he were part of the wallpaper, and Harold never protested because his life carried a secret. By day, Harold was a student of architecture, not in a prestigious university or under the wing of some celebrated mentor, but in the hidden corners of online programs and weekend classes, in the hours stolen between janitorial shifts, in supply closets where he opened his sketchbooks, each page filled with pencil-drawn elevations and intricate renderings. Beneath his mop bucket, he kept dreams rolled tight, blueprints drawn with the precision of an engineer and the heart of a visionary. Because Harold didn't just clean buildings. He dreamed of building them, and that dream was carved from the concrete of his neighborhood, a place he'd watched crack under neglect, where shops shuttered, where benches grew splintered, where children played on broken courts as though they were polished arenas. Harold had walked through that decay his entire life, and each line he drew on paper was a promise that one day he would rebuild what the world allowed to fall apart. It was a Tuesday morning when the announcement came. Sinclair Industries, the very company Harold scrubbed for, unveiled a citywide contest. Reimagine the downtown plaza. The prize, $50,000, and a chance to lead reconstruction in partnership with the city, a chance to leave a permanent mark on the very heart of Atlanta. Harold stood in the break room that day, the hum of vending machines filling the silence, the smell of cleaning fluid clinging to his hands. His eyes fixed on that flyer pinned to corkboard. Something stirred in him, something deeper than ambition, something heavier than hope. It was a need, a pull, an obligation to speak for the block that had raised him, for the cracked concrete he had once dribbled a basketball across, for the burned bookstore at Mr. Davis that no one had cared to rebuild, for his mother braiding hair on benches while the city moved past her unseen. That morning Harold went home and began to draw, not because he thought he would win, but because silence had never rebuilt anything, and Harold knew the block needed his voice even if it only existed on paper. For 3 weeks he sketched until his hands cramped, erased until his eraser was ground to dust, redrew until every angle aligned with his vision of a plaza that was not just a place but heartbeat. And when the submission deadline arrived, Harold sent his designs in, folded carefully, carried with reverence, mailed with the quiet strength of someone who understood that dreams are heavy even when they fit in an envelope. 3 weeks later, 20 finalists were chosen, invited to present their visions at Sinclair Tower. Harold's name was on the list. The others were firms, big firms, design teams in tailored suits who marched in with leather portfolios and sleek laptops, assistants carrying catered coffee trays, entourages that announced wealth before words. Harold came alone in pressed but modest clothes, his cleanest overalls and a crisp white shirt, his blueprints rolled tightly in a rubber band. He sat in the back of the boardroom unnoticed, a shadow among giants, until someone tapped him on the shoulder and whispered with smug certainty, "Maintenance is down the hall, buddy," a reminder that in their eyes he was not a competitor but a mistake in the seating chart. Harold only nodded and said softly, "I'm not maintenance." And when he took his seat again, laughter bubbled, whispers curled to the air. Must have gotten lost. Their dismissive chuckles sharper than knives. Yet Harold stayed calm, steady, unbothered, because he had lived with dismissal all his life, and it never stopped him from moving forward. The presentations began, slick slides, expensive digital models projected on the walls, slogans about future and innovation, visions filled with chrome, glass, and sterile landscaping, but there was no soul in them, no story, no heartbeat, just profit disguised as design. And then Harold's name was called. Laughter rippled again, louder this time. One executive rolling his eyes, muttering, "This should be quick," as though Harold's presence were entertainment and not competition. Harold walked forward slowly, no slides, no laptop, no assistants, just his hands, his paper, his truth. He unrolled his blueprints across the table, and for the first time the room grew quiet, not out of respect but out of confusion, until Harold began to speak. "I grew up 2 blocks from that plaza," he said, his voice steady, rich, carrying the weight of lived truth. "My mama used to braid hair on the benches while I played basketball nearby. I watched Mr. Davis's bookstore burn down, and no one rebuilt it. This design isn't just a space, it's a story." He pointed to a shaded section on his blueprint. "That's a vendor market. Rent-free for 10 years. A place where small black businesses can plant roots without the weight of impossible rent." His finger moved the center. "That's a performance circle, music, spoken word, a stage for voices that have never been amplified in the city." And then he unveiled his list of materials: reclaimed wood, solar panels, water systems designed to feed back into community instead of draining it. The silence in that room shifted. It was no longer mockery. It was realization. Murmurs rose, then something unexpected, applause. One by one the executives leaned forward, eyes narrowing, not in scorn but in curiosity, in respect, in something unfamiliar when directed at Harold. They weren't just looking at a janitor anymore. They were looking at a man who carried vision in his bones, but not everyone clapped. 3 major firms filed protests immediately after, their voices sharp with entitlement. "He's not a licensed architect," they argued. "He's not part of a recognized design team." One even accused Harold of manipulating sympathy to capture attention, as though authenticity were manipulation and truth were a trick. The board went behind closed doors for days, Harold waiting in silence, continuing his janitorial shifts while executives debated his worth, scrubbing the very floors beneath the offices where his fate was being decided, until one evening a letter arrived at his modest apartment. Finalists selected: Mr. Harold Thompson. Harold had won, but the story didn't end with a victory. The mayor's office caught wind of it, a black janitor out-designing corporate giants, and soon the press caught fire. TV stations called. Headlines blazed across social media. The man with the mop who rebuilt the block. Interviews, requests, recognition came rushing like a storm. And then the CEO of Sinclair, a man who had never once acknowledged Harold in 17 years, asked for a meeting. In the same boardroom where laughter once filled the air, this time, when Harold walked in, the executives who had chuckled at him stood up, and they shook his hand. Construction began 6 months later, Harold leading every detail, selecting materials, working with vendors, ensuring local artists left their imprint, refusing every attempt to strip the soul from his design, standing firm even when money men tried to reduce his plaza to another lifeless structure. When the plaza finally opened, the streets overflowed. Families came, elders came, children came with wide eyes and sketchbooks clutched to their chests. The ribbon cutting was crowded with cameras. But the moment belonged not to Sinclair but to Harold, because it was Harold who stepped forward to speak. Harold whose words echoed across the plaza built from his dreams. "They saw a janitor," he said, his voice breaking yet unshaken. "But they didn't see the nights I studied in closets between trash runs. They didn't see the way I watched this neighborhood crumble and promised myself I'd help rebuild it. What we look like has nothing to do with what we can build. Sometimes the people closest to ground have the clearest view of what's falling apart." The crowd erupted, applause rolling like thunder through space, and somewhere in the back stood a boy clutching a pencil tighter, eyes fixed on Harold. Dreams suddenly possible because he had seen himself reflected in a man once invisible. They laughed when the black janitor entered the meeting, but they stopped laughing when he pulled out the blueprints, because the world has a habit of underestimating those who do not boast, of dismissing those in overalls, of forgetting that greatness does not need a title, Sometimes it smells of cleaning fluid and hard work. Sometimes it moves unseen through empty hallways at night. But when the dust settles, it is not the suits who build a future. It is the dreamers who never stop believing they could. Because in the end, Harold's journey wasn't just about blueprints or plazas. It was about the truth the world keeps trying to bury. That value is not defined by uniforms. That talent is not reserved for titles. And that dignity is not measured by the job you hold, but by the dream you refuse to let go of. Too often, society looks at people like Harold and sees only what they do, never who they are. A mop in his hands blinded them to the brilliance in his mind. But Harold's life reminds us that no position is permanent, no judgment is final, and no voice is too small to shape the future. The lesson is this: never underestimate quiet persistence. Never laugh at the one society ignores, and never forget that the same person cleaning your floors may be the one drawing the future you will one day walk through. Greatness doesn't always announce itself with credentials or suits. It grows in silence, in resilience, in nights spent studying when the world is asleep, and when the moment comes, greatness will step into the room, unroll its vision, and leave the doubters speechless. So the next time you feel overlooked, the next time someone dismisses you, remember Harold Thompson. Remember the janitor who became the architect of change. And let his story remind you that the world can mock, the world can doubt, the world can underestimate, but it cannot erase the power of a dream backed by relentless work, because dreams don't just survive in silence, they rise. Thank you for watching today's story. If this moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own worth, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. Until next time, stay strong, stay seen, and never stop building what they say you can't.